The situation in the east is about to radically change as Ukrainians are ready to deliver a crushing blow to Russians as they retake Svatove-Kreminna and completely disrupt the logistics of Russians in this area. At the same time, according to President Zelensky, there is very few Russian forces left in Bakhmut, which basically means it looks like that they are ready to give up their dreams at capturing this settlement. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And our first picture comes to us from Belarus, where in one of the military bases located in Minsk, there was a sudden test how quickly the soldiers can get ready for combat activities. According to Ukrainian sources, at this very moment there are approximately 10,200 Russian soldiers who are located in Belarus next to border with Ukraine. And in addition to that, the activity by Belarusian soldiers has been reported as well. But pretty much every single Ukrainian authority does not believe that Russians, even with the support of Belarusians, will invade Ukraine from the north. And the reason for this, it is because they simply do not have enough military vehicles and equipment. And we were talking about this in more details in my yesterday's episode. Next we go to the capital of Ukraine, Kiev, where we can see a pretty interesting picture of electric vehicle, Tesla, carrying a diesel generator attached to its back. Even though the traditional sources of energy for cars, such as petroleum and diesel, is still relatively available in Ukraine, there is a very big problem for obvious reasons with the electricity. And because of this, some Tesla owners started to try to solve the problems in very creative ways, which basically means modern problems require modern solutions. Next we go to Kharkov, where today another attack of Russians has been reported against energy infrastructure of Ukraine. And then, as we cross the border and go to Rostov region to the city of Novocherkassk, a pretty much brand new military barracks of Russians has been burned to the ground. Due to still ongoing demonetization, I'm no longer able to show these last two videos. But if you want to show the financial support to the channel, and if you want to get access to all these photos and videos, I uploaded some of them to my Discord, and the rest will be available on my Patreon. And as always, you can find all the links down below. And then right here, we have a video which I luckily can still use, and it basically shows us the light bulb with the small installed battery. This might be an extremely beneficial purchase for Ukrainians, because the way it works is whenever there is no electricity and while the light bulb is still connected to the socket, it will charge the battery, and as soon as the power is gone, it will be able to produce light for at least 3-4 more hours. It costs approximately $10, and it might be a very great solution for whenever there is simply no light. Alright, and now let's really quick talk about the President Zelensky, because today he held his annual address to the Ukrainian parliament, which lasted approximately 52 minutes, and he made some very good statements. The main topics of his speech was about unity and political partnership, and in the end he was awarding medals to Ukrainian soldiers. And one of the first statements that he made is that right now it is as important as ever for Ukrainian people to preserve their unity despite their own differences and interests. Because the overall unity of Ukrainians is what will strengthen the people and the state, and such strength will only bring the ultimate victory much sooner. Zelensky then also mentioned that besides unity, there also must be a very close partnership, especially in the politics. What he basically meant is that mostly politicians should abandon their ambitious partisanship and not do these like small shady things in order to move up the career ladder. But instead, people all around Ukraine, in the media and in the government, should instead partner and work towards common goals. And ultimately, the President Zelensky was awarding the medals not just to soldiers, sailors, paratroopers, officers or generals, but instead to the people who are fighting for the freedom of Ukraine. And as we all started to feel at least a little bit more motivated after this incredible speech by President Zelensky, let's get back to the news updates. Because to be honest, I have a very big feeling that some major and radical changes will start happening as early as the beginning of next year. And if you don't want to miss any of these updates as soon as they start happening, just please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and participate in some polls, because I'm pretty curious to see what you think. Alright, and to begin with, let's really quick talk about the updates from the south. And first of all, it has been reported that the artillery duels between Russia and Ukraine continued on both sides of Dnipro River, with Russia shelling the right side and Ukraine attacking the left one. The main focus of Russians was the city of Kherson itself, while Ukrainians were primarily attacking Oleshki and going as deep as reportedly Chaplinka. At the same time, Ukrainians continued their distant attacks against the Russian formations located in Tokmak. And there even was a partisan activity inside Melitopol itself. And at the same time, some minor combat interactions have been reported on the border between Zaporozhye and Kherson regions, which basically means that Ukrainians were attacking retreating Russians who were withdrawing from Kherson. And speaking about Kherson, the Russian infiltrator of this region, Vladimir Saldo, he acknowledged that yes, Kherson is no longer under our control. He then also added that the biggest wish of Russia will be to, as he called it, deoccupy Kherson, but I mean, it's no rush to do it, so they might do it or they might not. Most likely they will not. And then right here we have a pretty interesting map, which is uploaded on the website of the President of Russia itself. And as you can see, Zaporozhye, Donetsk, Luhansk and Kherson regions are no longer shown as a part of Russia. Quite interesting, right? And I mean, besides the Russian infiltrators and collaborators in these regions, we honestly haven't heard much about these areas from the government of Russia itself, so I will not be surprised if they make it look like it never happened. But okay. And now let me give you a similar quick update, but this time from the east. And first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainian forces might have made much bigger territorial gains than previously assessed. And at the same time, the Russian forces are most likely near its end, or politically correct, near its culmination in Bakhmut area. And we will talk about this in a little bit more details very soon. But for now, one of these settlements where Ukrainians most likely made at least some territorial gains is this settlement of Kuzomivka. And as you can see from its location, in case Ukrainians are successful, this will allow them to approach Svatove from both directions, from the north and from the south. At the same time, Ukrainians also continued to push extremely hard against Kreminna, which is located on the another side of this crucial highway, Svatove-Kreminna. And until recently, Russians have been constantly sending reinforcements to this settlement. But very interestingly enough, it has been reported that Russians removed their military headquarters, along with other important people and officers, away from Kreminna. So we basically have a very classic scenario. The regular Russian soldiers are protecting the retreat of their officers. And as we go a little bit more to the south, there have been several attempts by Russians to breach the defense of Ukrainians in Bilohirivka, Solidar and Opetne, but Ukrainians repelled the majority of these attacks. And pretty much yes, the biggest fight of the east at this very moment is happening around Bakhmut, which as you can see right here, still stands. And recently, the head of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, Kirill Budanov, was spotted extremely close to the front lines in Bakhmut. His exact location was obviously never officially revealed, and the pictures were published after he made his visit, but some internet detectives were able to find out that he was as close as only 666 meters away from the front lines. And to be honest, I can already see the Russian propagandists using this number to support their claims about Ukrainian Nazis and devils. But okay, because as we move down to Klishchinivka and to this small settlement of Pisky, Ukrainians reportedly also repelled even more attacks by Russians. And interestingly enough, another private military company called Patriot, which is the direct competitor of Prigozhin's Wagner, has been spotted in Vuhledar. But what makes this specific military unit so special is that allegedly it belongs to the Ministry of Defense of Russia, Sergei Shoigu. And right before I talk about the upcoming drastic changes in the east, which will most likely determine the fate of the entire region, let's really quick take a look at this map, which shows us the changes in territorial control. And first of all, as you can see right here, Russians captured a little bit more land to the north of Mariinka. As we move up, we can see that Ukrainians decontested some area around Pisky. As we move closer to Bakhmut, we can see that Russians changed the directions of their attacks, as well as captured a little bit more land to the north and to the south of this city. Our next stop brings us closer to Spirne, where, as you can see, Russians were also relatively successful. And ultimately, as we move to Kharkov region, we can see that Russians were able to capture a little bit more land to the northwest of Mykolaiivka. Alright, and now as promised, let's talk about this crushing blow that Ukrainians are about to deliver against Russians, and probably, as some of you might have already guessed, it is going to be about Svatove-Kreminna highway. So, like mentioned previously, Ukrainians are actively pushing against both of these settlements from different directions. But in response to that, Russians do send reinforcements to these settlements, but important people and officers, along with their military headquarters, they already started to retreat. Most likely, the liberation of this highway will start with Ukrainians retaking first Svatove. And after this, along with them being able to disrupt the logistics of Russians to Kreminna, Ukrainians will liberate this settlement as well. And as soon as Kreminna falls back in the hands of Ukrainians, this is when other major cities in this area, such as Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, will become in the range for Ukrainian artillery and distant attacks. Because yes, as you can see, these settlements are located on the intersection of major highways, which lead directly to other cities, such as Luhansk and Donetsk, and pretty much supply the entire Russian forces in Donetsk region. Which basically means retaking Lysychansk and Severodonetsk will severely disrupt logistics of Russians to the north of this region. After this, according to the head of Luhansk region, Sergei Gaidai, Ukrainians will most likely start marching towards Starobilsk, which, as you can see right here, is also located on the intersection of other major roads. And as a result of all of this, most likely the ultimate goal of Ukrainians in this area will be to not let Russians capture their most promising locations, starting with Rubizhne and of course Bakhmut. Because, I mean, imagine that. Russians are bringing so much forces, equipment and vehicles just to capture this small settlement of Bakhmut. Just imagine what will happen if they fail there as well. Besides showing the entire world, and most importantly, the people of Russia, that the Russian army is not capable of doing pretty much anything, this will be a significant strike against the morale of Russian soldiers themselves. Which basically means that the victory of Ukrainians in Bakhmut will most likely not be the most important logistical victory, but instead it will be one of the most important emotional battles. And indeed, we already have signs that Russians significantly slow down their pace of attacks against this city, Such as, for example, the report by the Institute for the Study of War from a couple of days ago. And one of the things it mentioned is that Russians, instead of trying to advance closer to the city, they are trying to do everything possible to stall the combat activities in this area, so that they obviously have time to reinforce their positions and launch new offensive in the near future. And I mean, most certainly, Ukrainians cannot allow this to happen. It has also been mentioned that Russians are no longer using the large forces to attack Bakhmut, and instead they are sending smaller groups of 10 to 15 people. And then, according to President Zelensky himself, in fact, there are very few Russian soldiers left in Bakhmut city in comparison to what it used to be several months ago. All this means that Russians themselves most likely started to realize that Bakhmut is not going to happen. And since, to be honest, this could have been the only, let's call it major victory that Russia could have presented to its people, it's going to have even more devastating effects as soon as Ukraine is victorious in this city. And even though, unfortunately, it might sound very promising for Ukrainians, the cornered Russians might be forced to engage in the final rampage. And what I mean by that is that the military orders not to take any single step back might come all the way from the top. And since those Russians will have pretty much no other choice, they might start fighting as fiercely as never before. And all it will take is just one major victory of Ukraine in the east to put a final end in the military campaign of Russians in the east. I am personally assuming that this event might start happening as early as the beginning of next year. And once again, if you don't want to miss this, just please consider subscribing to my channel. It only takes one click. And if you want to support my work due to ongoing demonetization, please consider becoming my channel member, use a PayPal link, or become my Patreon, where you'll receive early access to the additional content. All the other useful links can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.